This meeting is now being recorded.
Yeah, good evening. Good afternoon, everybody. Okay, we'll start in about 1 minute. Okay, we'll start now. Welcome to the Office of Information Management and Analysis Brown Bag webinar series. The webinar will be strictly a 30-minute event for both presentations and questions and answers. We'd like to remind you that OIMA Brown Bag will be held every month. The next webinar will be on Thursday, October 27. Today's seminar is about safe consumer products. The speaker is Dr. Ann Cooper-Doherty. Dr. Ann Cooper is an environmental scientist in DTSC Safer Consumer Products program. She works on products, chemical prioritization, and developing the program's online stakeholder interface called SAFER. Dr. Doherty came to the program shortly after earning her PhD in Marine and Atmospheric Science from Stony Brook University in New York. With this brief introduction, I will pass the presentation to Ann Cooper. All right. Thank you for coming, Ann.
You're welcome. I hope everyone can hear me. Hopefully in person you can, but on the phone, let me know if you can. But thanks so much for having me. Maybe a little different than your normal talks, but wanted to kind of give you an idea about DTSC Safer Consumer Products Program. Kind of asking the question is our little sideline. So there are a number of examples of ways that identifying the source of chemicals in the aquatic environment and reducing those sources can result in decreased concentrations of those chemicals in the aquatic environment. So one of those great examples, Sept just released in the last couple of years about PBDE declines in San Francisco Bay as a result of these manufacturing regulatory efforts to reduce the use of PBDEs in products. So thinking about those kind of impacts, the Safer Consumer Products, or SCP program, hopes to have kind of similar impacts on chemicals in the aquatic environment, also the human, but I'm focused on the aquatic and assume that most people in this webinar are as well. So our program is product or source focused. We're really looking at where the chemicals are coming from and not just kind of the chemical in general. And we can focus on chemicals of concern for the aquatic environment, and that concern, there doesn't have to be a human aspect of it. We can focus on it just because of the aquatic impacts. And the range of those types of impacts are pretty wide, and I'll get into those in a little bit, but hopefully we'll have more success stories like the PBDE. So one of the main frameworks of our program is avoiding regrettable substitutes. Many of you probably know the example of BPA. A lot of concern about it, BPA-free water bottles everywhere, and now there's growing concern that the replacements for BPA are just as toxic as BPA itself. Which we would just term an regrettable substitute, and this is something that our program and the way our program is set up hopes to avoid. And another key part of our program is producer responsibility. So manufacturers, producers, they're the ones that really know their products, they know their supply chain, they know what their products need to be able to do, and they know the options for alternatives. So we really kind of put the onus on them to evaluate alternatives and come up with safer options instead of us trying to figure it out, for all kinds of different products. So key part of our program is we ask two fundamental questions. One, is it necessary? Is the function necessary? Is the chemical necessary in the product? And two, if it is necessary, is there a safer alternative to achieve that same purpose? So you'll see that echoed kind of throughout our process. So our program is a 4-step program. Basically, if you kind of break it down, I'll go into these more in detail, but just to kind of overview, the first is our candidate chemical list, which is our menu of chemicals that we can choose from, put together 23 other authoritative lists all kind of smushed together. The second is priority products. This is what we call our product chemical combinations that we've identified for having the potential to cause harm. The third step is the alternatives analysis, where manufacturers look at these priority products, consider alternatives, and do this kind of big analysis and report back to us. And the fourth step is regulatory responses, so that's kind of where we can come in and have some regulatory impact. So the first is the candidate chemical list. So this is our menu of chemicals. It's made up of 23 authoritative lists that have a wide number of range. You know, there's 303C, 303D lists, some PBT lists, some drinking water lists. On the aquatic side, there's obviously tons of human ones as well. And this is just a menu of chemicals that we can evaluate for inclusion in a priority product. Just because a chemical is on that list doesn't mean manufacturers can't use it. It doesn't mean it's the worst of the worst or that we think it's horrible. It's just this is our menu that we're evaluating. And it's about 2,000 chemicals, depending on how you count chemicals and groups of chemicals and all that complicated things. But the nice thing is that it updates automatically. So if, you know, one of the NCL lists for drinking water, if a new chemical gets added, that chemical automatically gets added to our candidate chemical list. So we're not constantly trying to follow the latest research and add chemicals. We kind of let other authoritative bodies do that for us, and then we just kind of reap the benefits. So we do have some exclusions. We can't do pesticides, can't do pharmaceuticals, radioactive chemicals, natural toxins, and some of their breakdown products. We're really focused on some SWRCB products. So some examples of chemicals on the CC list. It can be hit or miss. You know, some chemicals are always on there, and then there's some chemicals that you're like, why aren't they on there? So if you look at the monitoring strategies for chemicals of emergency concern report that came out as part of the Water Board's work with the Science Advisory Panel, they had about 15 chemicals that were highlighted as needing monitoring. Excluding the pesticides and pharmaceuticals, a lot of them are on our list. But interestingly, one, galaxolide, is not on there. Not sure why. I mean, obviously why it's not on the list, but I guess no authoritative bodies so far put it on there. But anyway, so you can kind of get an idea of the types of things that are not on our list. And if you're ever curious about the chemicals that are on our list, you can go to CalSafer, the website's at the bottom right there, and that's our online database stakeholder engagement piece. And you can go to search our candidate chemical database, and we've got some really advanced ways you can search. You can search by the list it's on, by the hazard trace, all kinds of things. And you can see if your favorite chemical's on there. And you can also download the whole candidate chemical list if you want to do some sort of analysis of it in Excel or PDF form. So the next step is priority product. Like I said, this is a product chemical combination with a product context. So this is where it gets a little reg speaky. We have to look at the potential for exposure to the candidate chemical in the product and the potential for that exposure to contribute to or cause significant or widespread adverse impacts, which is a pretty dense way of saying that we have to kind of connect the dots, but we're not meeting numerical thresholds. We don't look for the chemical that's above this certain concentration in the environment, then we go on it. We are kind of connecting the dots. Is the chemical in the product? Is there potential for aquatic organisms or humans to be exposed to that chemical because it's in the product? And is there potential for that exposure to contribute to or cause significant or adverse or widespread adverse impacts? So those are the kind of dots that we have to connect. Like I said, we're not meeting thresholds or number of values. It's more of a narrative standard that we kind of need to walk through. But it gives us some flexibility, potentially especially the word potential. So, and when we are evaluating these adverse impacts, there's a wide number of adverse impacts that we can evaluate. I kind of focus on some of the more aquatic ones, but aggregate effects, like if an organism at the end of a sewage treatment plant pipe is sitting there and it's getting a chemical that's been used in 5 different products, even if that one product use may not be a ton, if over the different 5 sums up it's a lot, then we can consider that. Cumulative effects is if there's a number of different chemicals in a family that all have a similar mode of action, so there's going to be increased toxicity. We can evaluate physical chemical properties of environmental state. Interestingly, impairment of waste management organisms. If there's a chemical that might be interacting with the organisms in a wastewater treatment plant, that can be cause for us to list a product. So we've got a pretty wide array of things that we can consider just from the aquatic perspective. So we released 3 initial priority products a little while ago now. Those are children's foam padded sleeping products containing the flame retardants TDCPP and TSEP. paint strippers containing methylene chloride, and spray polyurethane foam containing MDI, so dicyanate. The first one of those, the children's foam pad sleeping products, is in the regulatory rulemaking process right now, and they're going to continue to move on with the rest of them. So those priority products, those initial priority products were done a little differently. Our regs kind of required us to do them a little differently just to get some stuff out the door. But from now on, all of our priority products that we list are going to come from our work plan. And our work plan we release every 3 years, and we released our 2015-2017 one, obviously, last year. And in it, we highlight product categories that we're going to be focusing on. So any priority product that we come out with is going to be in that product category. So they range. There's some really super wide ones like beauty, personal care, and hygiene products, which you can only imagine the number of products that's included in that category, or some more specific ones like household, office furniture, and furnishings, which we even specify more and say only flame retardants and perfluorinated chemicals. So there's kind of a range: building products, cleaning products, fishing and angling equipment, office machinery, and then clothing. So part of this work plan, we identify some policy priorities that we want to focus on when we're looking at priority products. And there's a number of them you can see there, but two of them, aquatic resource impact and water quality monitoring, are both related to water and aquatic impact. So we're really kind of committed to focusing on chemicals that may be adversely impacting the aquatic environment. So our process of selecting a priority product is at times a long one. We do research, we identify product categories for a work plan, and then we do more research. You know, imagine some of those categories are pretty broad. We really need to kind of understand them, the chemicals that they're used. And we're in that research phase now. And this is like late-breaking news, like send out the bulletin. I don't even think the email's been sent yet. So you're very lucky that today's the day that I'm giving this talk. So as a part of our work plan, the next step is we're starting a conversation about 3 topics. And you'll notice 2 of them are aquatic-related. The first, potential aquatic impact and continued uses of non-phenol ethoxylates and triclosan. This is just coming out today. The second, nail salon products and chemicals, not as aquatic. And the third is perfluorinated, polyfluorinated alkyl substances in carpets and rugs and their treatment. So 2 out of 3 of those have strong ties to the aquatic environment, which I, as an aquatic person, was very excited about. So this webinar is going to be in November, around 10:30 on the 15th. And this is, we're calling it a mega webinar, where we're going to kind of set the stage for these continued conversations about these topics. It's not regulatory. We're just having discussions with stakeholders because we're trying to learn more information, and we're just trying to engage and get more information. So we're going to present the process that we're going through, and we're going to present some key questions that we have. So, for example, for non-phenol ethoxylates and triclosan, things that we want to know: what's the latest aquatic monitoring data? There's some out there that's a couple years old. You may know that both of these chemicals have seen a lot of change in their product use over the last 5 to 10 years. Concentrations may be changing. So what's the latest that's out there?
Can I ask, what are they in?
So we will release that in the webinar, but NPEs are surfactants. They're used in detergents and cleaning supplies. They're used in the clothing process. And then triclosan is the antimicrobial. FDA has taken some recent action, and we're just trying to see what else it's used in. So there'll be more. When we get closer to the webinar, we'll release a background document, which will have more of our rationale, more information about products, and a whole list of specific questions. We're also interested in other CECs that may be of concern, chemicals of emerging concern, that particularly those in the aquatic field are really concerned about, and things that we should be focusing on. And then product use, so a lot of that's aimed at manufacturers. Are you still using this? How much? Why? Those kind of things. So that's pretty exciting for us, and if you'll notice, if you go back to the Science Advisory Panel report on CEC monitoring, 3 of those are all on the list. So hopefully we're kind of listening to what people are saying. And these kind of reports are actually really helpful to us to help prioritize. There's tons of chemicals in the aquatic environment and the human environment. And people that take those into account and evaluate them and prioritize them is really helpful for us than trying to wade through every single chemical that might be out there. So if you go back to this process, the research, the work plan, back to the research, as we'll do this conversation, we'll kind of kind of move along in our process and hopefully come out of that with some priority products that we want to move forward with. We'll put them through the rulemaking process, and then that starts the alternatives analysis process. So manufacturers don't have to do anything legally until it goes through rulemaking. So alternatives analysis, this is the manufacturers are doing it, and they're answering, once again, these key questions. Is it necessary? Is there a safer alternative? And have they avoided regrettable substitutes? It's, once again, also a narrative standard. They're not trying to meet specific number thresholds. They're just trying to evaluate all the different options and see what works best. And the framework is a little broader than some of the other alternative analysis frameworks. They have to consider ecological impacts, full life cycle from the beginning all the way to the end of life, and economic analysis. So each manufacturer can evaluate how the economic impacts may change for them. And these AAs will be available for public comment after the manufacturer completes them. So this is really where the rubber kind of meets the road with this process. You know, we've evaluated, we've come up with something we're concerned about, but this is where manufacturers have to go in and figure out what are the trade-offs, what do we know, what don't we know, you know, what do we have to keep our products working the way we want it to, and what are the alternatives and what are their downsides. So that'll be very interesting. Stay tuned for when the first AA actually gets done. And then the last step is the regulatory response. So manufacturers do the AA, they give it to us, here's what we're going to do. We look at that AA and we could say, that's great, you're doing great, move on, we're not going to have any regulatory response. We could also say, you owe us additional information, you owe consumers additional information, safety measures, sales restrictions, end-of-life product stewardship, like take-backs or things like that. We could even say research funding. So they come back and say, there are no safer alternatives. Then we can say, okay, fine, you need to fund some research to find safer alternatives. And these will also be available for public comment. So if you think we should do way more, you can comment and say, no, that's a bad decision. So there's a lot of chances for public input during our process. As I've kind of hopefully mentioned, we have comment periods for our work plan, for our regulations, for the AAs, for the reg response. Kind of every step of the way, there's a chance for the public, other agencies, and stakeholders to contribute to our process. And you can do all that through CalSafer. Once again, the little middle box on the bottom says make a comment. You can go in there and see what's open for comment now and provide comments. And we do heavily encourage and favor comments from other regulatory agencies. Those actually in our regs are called out as holding a lot of weight. Workshops, like I mentioned in the webinar, and the following processes that will happen after that, and there's all kinds of workshops that will continue around a number of different topics that continue to happen. And then petitions. So if you go to CalSafer, again, on the right, to submit a petition, if there's a chemical that you're really concerned about, you can petition us to add it to our list outside of the authoritative list. There's a decent amount of information you have to provide. You can't just say add it and move on. You kind of have to do some of the research, and then we will go through the rulemaking process and add it. The same thing holds for priority products. If there's a product chemical combination you're really worried about, let us know, and we can evaluate the petition and once again go through the rulemaking process. And this is interesting because this is one way that we can list a priority product not in the work plan. So you can petition us any product chemical combination, regardless of if it's in the work plan or not. It's an interesting question. And we did get a petition. So we got a petition from the Center for Environmental Health to list BPA in food and beverage cans. So we are evaluating that right now, and we will see what that comes out to. But if we do grant it, the key is we still go through the rulemaking process. So even if we grant it, there's still chances for stakeholders to weigh in and say if they think it's a good idea or not. So just because we grant it doesn't mean it's 100% going to happen. And then lastly, a little bit of begging. We have a lot of data needs associated with our program, as hopefully you can kind of imagine. And there have been some studies recently, this one just earlier this year, looking at the fact that a lot of what's being studied represents a very small portion of the chemicals that are actually out there in the aquatic environment. So this is in the Baltic Sea, and they looked at all the studies and the chemicals in the Baltic Sea, and they found that 20% of the substances there constituted 87% of the studies that they found. So people are really focusing on the chemicals a small number, and there's this whole wide array of chemicals that are out there that aren't necessarily getting as much information. And I thought this quote was great about a small number of chemicals may be persistent not only in the environment or in the human body, but also in the scientific literature about how the same chemicals kind of keep getting studied, which is great. And, there's definitely a need for that for, certain purposes, but for our selfish purposes, it doesn't help us as much because if there's no regulatory steps, then, it's good to know, but it doesn't really help us. So we really need information on those chemicals that aren't well studied. We need information on the presence in the aquatic environment, like I said, all these different media. Wastewater treatment plant data is really, I get super excited about it, but really helpful. Recycled water activities, particularly in California, since we're trying to do all this, water management activities, understanding what chemicals may be impacting the ability to use recycled water is really helpful. So, for example, Orange County Sanitation District that's doing the groundwater inputs of recycled water, they actually wrote us a comment as part of our work plan and said, listen, here are the chemicals that we are at risk of maybe, not being able to meet our regulatory limits on, and we really would appreciate if you would help us. And one of those is triclosan. So hopefully we can help them. But those kind of things really, there's a lot of weight. Like I said, our regs call out. If another agency writes us and says, hey, we really need help with this, we in our regs, can give higher weight to that. So we really want that kind of information. Chemical trends in the aquatic environment are really interesting as well, and emerging concerns. So if there's chemicals that are going up that people are really worried about, we want to know about it. And prioritization for California, kind of like that advisory panel, that was really helpful. SWRCB does some work. I know other groups throughout the state do this kind of work, but it really helps us to kind of sift through all these different chemicals and figure out which ones we should really be devoting our efforts to. And then source identification. It's a little tough, particularly for the aquatic environment, but as I mentioned, we have to list a product. We can't just say, triclosan, everyone stop using triclosan everywhere. We have to be really specific about what we list. So understanding the source of the chemicals is really, really important, and we try really hard. And we don't have, particularly for the aquatic environment, we can't 100% say that this one, microgram of triclosan came from this one product, but we do have to be able to kind of make some connections. So source identification is really super helpful. So that ends the begging for the data, and also the overview of the program helps we understand a little bit more about what we're doing and how we can hopefully help with the aquatic environment. And I'm open for questions. And this is my contact info. Our website, you can download our work plan, see our activities and priority products, what's up for comment, and then the CalSpacer link is at the very bottom.
Okay. Thank you all. People on the phone, we will unmute you in a little bit, and you can ask. So if there is any question from the room until then, you can go ahead and ask.
All guests have been unmuted.
In the chat.
Thank you very much. That's really good. I like taking a lot of notes and going back and looking at it, going back and doing a lot of research.
Are you asking, sir? Just hold on. Is somebody speaking?
Sorry, that was not a question.
Oh, okay.
Thanks for the presentation. And so since this is going to be new with the process where manufacturers are providing the information in the entire process, right? Is there a time estimate for how long it'll take? Is it just kind of to be seen?
Yeah, it's kind of one of those, it's almost like an iterative process. Like, we present some ideas, we get a ton of data, we have to go, kind of scrunch through that data, and, for these are three, for this upcoming webinar, and we're going to have some more focused meetings after these webinars, so that itself will be a process. But the sheer amount of data that you can get from some of these, open comment periods is pretty vast. So it'll take us some time to go through theirs, and, even then we'll have to evaluate, is it still worth pursuing? We may get data that says, you know what, this isn't worth it, we're just going to, not continue with that. So it'll probably take a little while.
That's a lot to do.
Yeah, but we want to make sure, we make the right decisions and that we engage stakeholders throughout the process, so that people aren't blindsided you know, with what we're coming out with. We want people to kind of understand, you know, what we're doing and why we're doing it and that kind of thing. So, but, you know, I know I'm so impatient too. Like, let's go. But yeah, trying to keep processing.
I have a question.
So,
is there? You mentioned that you only ask companies to look at alternatives after it's been like identified as a problem, if you will.
Okay. Yeah.
Is there anything that makes the companies now look at the chemicals they're adding before or all the time before they manufacture products?
Like during development.
Yeah, and that's part of there's a much larger green chemistry movement.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, one of my coworkers said it best that our regulations will have truly succeeded if we never have to list a priority product, because that means manufacturers are taking these evaluations, because the hope is they're going to want to avoid our process because they put so much time and money into putting these products out and testing them and all that. They don't want to have to then get told a couple years from now they got to stop. So hopefully companies will start incorporating the components of our alternatives analysis at the beginning, and then they won't get caught up in our regs. So that's the hope. But as of now, there's nothing that we can force them to do at the beginning. But there are a lot of, you know, companies are actually, you know, moving that way. They're seeing that people really want to know what's in the products and be assured that they're safe.
Any questions? Okay. Thank you, Anne.
You're welcome.
All right. Okay, that's it. Thank you. Bye.
The host has left the meeting. So at this time, the meeting will come to an end. Thank you and goodbye.